Welcome to Mining Over Canada. Join the Canadian Securities Exchange and our partners in a first-hand look into our country's vast mining landscape.
Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. Today, I am joined as part of our special presentation of Mining Over Canada with my wonderful friends and colleagues at the Canadian Securities Exchange and all of your hosts that covered the regions across the country. So it's been an amazing ride. We've done 5 weeks. We're going into our finale week, and we got to experience just so much amazing content and covered so many topics in the mining sector. I'd like to introduce my colleagues to start off. We started off our tour of the country in Quebec and Atlantic Canada with my colleague Scott Pritchard, who's based out of Montreal. Scott, hello. Thank you for joining us. We then moved on to Ontario with our wonderful host, Barrington Miller. Thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you, Anna.
We moved on to the Atlantic Shield with my colleague, Mark Francis, who's based out of Calgary. Hi, Mark.
Canadian Shield.
The Canadian Shield. I'm sorry.
It's okay. And the western part of it, to be geologically precise, but anyway.
And the western part of it, to be precise. We then moved up north to the Great Northern Territories with my colleague, Anil Mall. Hello, Anil. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone.
I think everyone in the world has become very fond of your blue wall, Anil. Don't ever like that color. And then I finished things off in BC as the host of BC Week, and it's just been an unbelievable ride. The one thing I have to say about this initiative is I myself learned so much about the mining sector that I didn't know, and I hope you guys did, and I hope our audience got at least a few things from it. We're gonna just talk about in the spirit of 5 things we learned, although it's probably endless, we could talk for hours. Just some of the takeaways that we had. Scott, why don't we start off with you? You launched the event. You were the brave soul that launched the event. So why don't we start with you? What were some of your takeaways?
Well, thanks, Anna, and hello, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. My name's Scott Pritchard, and I work for the CSE out of Montreal office. First of all, Anna, congratulations on this Mining Over Canada initiative. Could you tell everybody how many videos did we do by the end of this, and how many have been posted?
Well, I don't know if the final tally has been made, but I have heard rumors that it was approximately 60. Our colleague James Black, who a lot of you know is not on this interview, but he did a lot of the editing, so I'm sure he knows the exact number that kept him up late at night doing these, but I think it was approximately 60.
So what a wealth of information, great education for everybody, including us, all at the CSC, for every region that we've covered, the whole Canada, obviously. So I think that, first of all, if you ask me what I learned, is what a vast country and what an important industry. So maybe fairly obvious, but when you start drilling down and see the diversity of all the different people that are involved in this, and how it really does have a huge reach in society across Canada. So again, your initiative was fabulous. I'll talk a little bit about Quebec because that's where I'm focused. We did several interviews with key people here, including the Mining Society, actually, that you did, Anna, an interview. And you also interviewed Angelina Mehta, who is Laurentian Bank's head of mining, the sector for investment banking there. Interesting to note also that the new CEO of Laurentian Bank is a woman, and that theme, it gets expanded. We did an interview with Kimberly Darlington, who's head of the Quebec chapter of Women in Canada Mining. Women in Canada in the mining sector, or
Women in Mining.
Don't know the exact title, but it is a Canadian organization, and she heads up this chapter here. And I've been to several events that they have attended, and a few that they've hosted, and it's a great organization. Just again, to touch on the theme of diversity and how many people are affected in this. This is not just a bunch of old men mining underground somewhere. This is a huge investment banking, in legal practice and counting, everything. It really does affect a lot of people. Just on that note, in the public markets where we play in, we did an interview with Louis Doyle, who's head of the Quebec Bourse, which is an agency here that promotes the public sector, and mining is very important here in Quebec. So, you know, just on a general topic of what I learned is that the mining sector is very important to everybody in Canada, but in Quebec, there's some extra government initiatives that helps the mining sector. And honestly, I wasn't aware of the depth of that. And just shows that no matter what party is in power, whatever, mining has stayed as one of those sectors that money, there's a big focus on money for that sector. We also have a great wealth of the diversified labor force. We interviewed Eric Lemieux, who's a mining consultant and geologist. So he would be a guy who went into all the, or studied all the mining companies from financial aspects. Where's the money going? How's that progressing? How's it utilized? And are there any results? We talked to Frank Mariage, who's a security lawyer at Fasken Martineau, and he's the head of one of the government agencies here called CDEX that gives money out to companies that are doing mining projects here in Quebec. So, you know, we got a pretty good picture that Quebec is really open for business, you know, for everybody from across Canada, from across the world to come in and to do mining here and get involved in it. And there is a big support group here, tax friendly, you know, obviously big proven mineral wealth, especially up in Val d'Or in that area. As we all know, there's a huge amount of mining, gold mining. It's been going on for a long time, but other areas as well. I'll just finish by saying that in the last 10 years as well, the government has created a Plan Nord, which is just a plan for mining, for more infrastructure into Quebec, into different areas in Quebec. So this is not going to end. This is a continuation. We live in such a vast country, and you know, there's lots of mines to be built and to be found, minerals to be found. So yeah,
that's great. And you know, you brought up a few things that I think are really important. I mean, there was so much great content that came out of that week, but I think one of the big ones for me was really understanding what the government subsidies are. And what I liked about it the most is the way that they've set up that program is that you sit alongside the government of Quebec as a shareholder. And I think that really speaks volumes to the commitment that Canadians have to this sector, how important it is to our ecosystem, and that, you know, there's speculation in this investment side of things. And when you have the government next to you, I think that's, you know, it just brings together an ecosystem that wouldn't have necessarily been there in good markets and bad. And it keeps things within our borders, which is kind of amazing. So that really stuck with me. The other thing is a lot of the people that we talked to were not as old as I expected. Lots of young people, lots of diversity. You brought up Angelina Mehta. I mean, what a dynamo she is. I can't believe the age she is. And I think she has 3 or 4 degrees. I can't remember.
oh, she was fantastic.
Yeah, just, it was amazing. Guys, anything else that you found from the Quebec and Atlantic week?
I just want to say one other thing just on what you're saying, Anna, is that, and again, maybe some of our viewers aren't aware of that, the Fraser Institute does a review every year on mining jurisdictions across the world, and Quebec is actually in the top 5 continuously, as are some of the other provinces, but you know, some of our viewers may not be aware of that. So open for business. Come on over.
Any other comments, Jens?
I just want to comment, particularly your interview as part of the Women in Mining, or was it Women in Atlantic Canada? I'm not sure.
We'll get that straight one day. Yeah.
We'll get that straight. And what actually stood out was visually. You're both you and oh my God, I just
Kimberly?
blanked on
Liz McKenzie.
Liz McKenzie. Sorry, Liz. Sorry. You and Liz, both young, dynamic, and Liz's dad, Francis, made sure that she was in the board meetings, that she was a part of it. And when I was watching the interview with your dad, you were saying the exact same thing. And that's what it takes. Just takes that one, I'm going to call it a leap of faith, but one push, one helping hand. And it was really cool that it was, your parents. And I thought that was a really nice tie-in, and it bodes well for the future of mining, both on both coasts. So.
Absolutely. The other thing about Quebec and Atlantic Canada, especially Quebec, is there is I think the education around mining in Quebec is world renowned. I think that the programs and the people that are coming out of that, the graduates, are known around the world. If you have a degree in Quebec in the mining as a mining engineer or somewhere around the sector, it's very well known globally. So that was pretty impressive as well.
And I didn't mention anything about Atlantic Canada. And I think, as you said, Anna, when we started getting involved in Atlantic Canada, we realized that we should have had maybe a whole section just on that area of Canada. And I think going forward, we probably will have more. And it's very active, as we know, and a lot of land there. Newfoundland.
Mining Over Canada Part 2. We will make sure that we spend as much time there as we can. All right, we're going to move along. Our next week was Ontario. Thank you very much, Scott. Please keep jumping in as we cross the country. Our next week was Ontario Week, with our wonderful host, Barrington Miller, who, by the way, if anyone can tell, was also the voice of Mining Over Canada.
Yes.
Your voice is it's well loved.
Yep, I have a face for radio, so I've been told.
Point you as the Morgan Freeman of Mining Over Canada. We've, your voice now.
Yeah, I'm hoping to voice many more videos. Thanks, Anna.
Okay, talk to us about Ontario.
Ontario. So for me, as our audience knows, and if you've watched any of the interviews I've been in, I was learning alongside everybody else, because I'm going to say I purposely went into not knowing anything, but that was just acquired over time of not knowing anything as far as the mining. So everything was an education to me. We interviewed and covered 3 CSE listed companies: Mustango, West Red Lake, and Argo Gold with Judy Baker. What did I learn? One, apparently I don't know Ontario. I don't know my own province. I don't know my backyard. So as much as I want to talk about the other areas and the other regions, I was speaking with James, and it's like, if you could choose one region to work in the sector, where would you work? And I'm like, Ontario, because I don't know it. Ontario is massive. Trivia question for those who have been paying attention: how many Portugals can fit in Ontario?
17?
39.
49.
Was it
49?
It's 49. 49 Portugals can fit in Ontario. The parts that stood out outside of just the vastness and some of the really cool service providers, and I think we need to give a shout out to the sponsors for Mining Over Canada. I think it was Gowlings, MNP, and one other, Odyssey Trust. So not only do they help Mining Over Canada, but the service providers for the mining sector really act as a support network. It's not just doing services, but they actually connect the various regions through Northern Ontario, which is something I wasn't thinking of as a role that they played. The 2 interviews for me that really stood out, outside of our wonderful issuers trading on the CSE, are Felix Lee from PDAC, the president, and the direction that PDAC is going to for 2021 and probably the future, because they were already in the works of doing a portion of their convention virtually. Things got pushed up due to COVID, but it's really, really cool that they used to connect. The world used to come to PDAC. Now PDAC is going to the world, because it's not inhibited by borders and travel and all of those things. So as well, I really, and this is not a kiss up move, but I really liked the interview with Pritchard. I thought it was heartfelt, it was honest, and we got to see a side of him that we normally don't see. And so I thought that was really cool. And his history and connection. I also learned about the origins of why Ontario became the financial backbone for the mining sector versus other provinces that may have had similar opportunities at the time. And it was that entrepreneurial risk-taking spirit, which still serves as the backbone for mining in Canada. So those are the things that I learned in Ontario.
You know, I one thing I have to mirror with you, Barrington, and this is, I'm embarrassed to say this, is I really had no idea how big Ontario was. I have driven across the country once, not fully across, from Winnipeg to Hamilton in another lifetime. And I remember hitting Ontario border and then it never ended. I mean, it was, I couldn't believe, how is this province so big? And so I think Ontario really, it embodies this, this marriage between the capital markets and the mining sector. Just having Toronto being kind of our financial institute in Canada, and then just the amount of mining going on. I think when we had our 5 things we learned, there's certain things like there's 42 active mines. There's
the numbers always around 40. It'll be 39 one year, 42, but you can count. And as mines drop off, mines pop up. So the magic number is 40. Sorry, Anna, I didn't mean to cut you off, but there's one other thing. And this ties into Scott with the provincial government. The provincial government is attracting business, and Ontario, like Quebec and the Atlantic provinces, Ontario's open for business. And in fact, they will basically guide you and help you from the very, very start right up until the very end. And all these programs are subsidized and covered by the provincial government. And we've done a series of interviews as well with that. So check it out when you get a chance.
Well, and I think you brought up Felix Lee. And I think one thing that was important about the PDAC interview that is a cornerstone for all of us in the mining sector is, first of all, the last time we were all together was PDAC 2020, which was literally the cusp of us all going into full lockdown. And I think it really is going to be that cornerstone of, it'll have been a year when we all get together again, and it's going to look extremely different. And so I think the PDAC one, resonates with anyone in the mining sector anywhere in the world of what we're going through. The other one I really loved about Ontario, before we move along, is the technology coming out of Ontario blew me away. Like, just the technology in the mining sector in Ontario is, I think, probably one of the leaders in the world. We'll have with us on our live event Don Duval with Norcat. Norcat was such a neat program. It is a functioning mine, and they take in technology and they test it out within an actual functioning mine to be able to see if it'll work, to use it as a selling feature globally to other mines. That one was really neat. I was really taken aback by all the technology being created.
Yeah, there's a ton, and with that same group, they actually incubate companies as well. And the mine is functioning. They can sell off their offcuts, and people can go and test it. I think they have the last 3 years they've been averaging 50 projects a year, so that's essentially one every week. But,
yeah, I think one of the greatest quotes that came from this was Don Duval said, "We don't have an innovation issue, we have an implementation issue," and they're really bridging that gap. Did any of you other hosts learn anything from Ontario? Did you want to say anything about Ontario while we're all here?
I can jump in there to echo what Barrington said. The PDAC interview was the interview with Felix Lee, I should say, was very interesting, because I think you touched on this as well, Anna. I think everybody in the resource sector is very curious as to what PDAC in 2021 will look like. And this gave everybody that sort of insight into what's going to be happening next year. So I actually found that one very interesting, not only to learn the history of PDAC and Felix himself, but just to see what's in store for us coming up in March.
For me, it was just reassuring.
Yeah.
Like I felt comfortable. Okay, they have their stuff together. And PDAC 2021 is March 8th to the 11th. So mark
If
it on your calendars.
PDAC is still alive, we're all going to be okay.
Yeah, it was, and they're like, yeah, we already have it covered. Yeah, we're good. Like we've adapted to change and all of those things. Okay,
Totally.
Ontario's out.
Ontario is great. Thank you so much, Barrington. We then moved into the Canadian Shield. Mark Francis, first of all, I have to say thank you. You really kind of, to be honest, were the driving force for this, the creation of this project. And you've been such a resource. I think all of us throughout the whole project have called you randomly going, what does this mean? Or so you've been our encyclopedia for the whole event. Thank you so much. What did you learn? I mean, listen, you know your stuff, but any big takeaways from the Canadian Shield?
Well, first of all, and Ontario is very much the Canadian Shield, as is Quebec, but we struggled, as we all know, for a name to cover Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, they call it Central Canada, but of course, that was a bit of a struggle. I think what really struck home for me is the sincerity and the discipline of the people involved through the various ages. And contrary to what governments may tell us and what the media may tell us, the mining industry has been very concerned about a number of issues for a long time. I was at one of the very first women in mining meetings because it was essentially launched in Manitoba in the 1990s by some of the women geologists in Winnipeg and in northern Manitoba. So the industry has really been focused for a long time on including the Aboriginal community and helping advance the Aboriginal community. Not perfect. And of course, there are always outliers who are bad behavior, where there's bad behavior, and we need government laws and rules without question. But the industry has really driven tremendous change in mine safety, environmental, and general inclusion for 3 decades and perhaps longer. And the other thing that it really hit home is how long it takes to change behavior patterns and institutional and cultural behavior patterns, for instance, with safety, for instance, with the environment. And it really, it takes a commitment all through an entire organization, not just the CEO and managers, but everyone has to engage, for instance, with safety. And Ed Hubert gave a great talk on the changes and how Canada has not just led the world as in being first, look at us, aren't we great? But we've actually worked very hard in our mining industry to bring the rest of the world along. And it was a really striking comment that Ed made that when some people from Latin America were talking with some Canadians, the any cultural differences or difficulties disappeared the moment they talked about safety, because it was a universal. And I noticed that happening with geologists. It doesn't matter if they speak 6 different languages. When they're talking about rocks, there's no cultural difference. They're very focused on the rocks and the science. And I think it comes back to that, a real commitment to excellence in the industry and in Canada that bridges the barriers.
Absolutely. The one thing that Ed said that really stuck with me, and I encourage people to check out that interview, was he talked about a culture of safety. And that really stuck with me, that these are not procedures in an employee handbook. There is a culture around caring and taking care of the employees that are in somewhat precarious positions underground at times, and creating that environment where your safety is our number one priority. And that really stuck with me. So I definitely encourage people to check that one out. I love learning about uranium. I really didn't know a lot about uranium, I must admit. And just the formation of it, not the formation, right, Mark? What's the term I'm looking for? Yes. So I had the chance to chat with Gwen Preston on it, and I guess, is it northern Saskatchewan? It produces, or it is the reserve of 90% of the uranium that's pulled out of the ground as we speak. I mean, that was amazing to me. You have
Yeah. Let's be, so Saskatchewan doesn't produce 90% of the world's uranium, but it does, I believe it is the largest or second largest producer. It has the highest grade deposits in the world. And Saskatchewan had to innovate with robotic mining because the uranium was so unsafe. The uranium was so high grade that there was concern about worker safety. And the uranium in some of the Saskatchewan deposits is so high grade that they actually dilute it in the mill. You absolutely would never do that with a gold deposit or a nickel or copper deposit, but they, in some cases, they need to, not all, but in some cases, they need to do that with some of the uranium from some of the stopes.
The other one I loved from the Canadian Shield was, and I can't remember the issuer, hopefully you can remember this, Mark, was the one that had a fire. A forest fire. Do you remember what issuer that was?
Tiger Gold.
That's it. And there's a few actual mining things I learned across the way that I thought were so interesting. The fact that this forest fire had naturally occurred on their property, it allowed them to literally fly over and see where there was mineralized rock instead of actually hunting on the ground, pulling moss up to take a look at what was underneath. I found that quite interesting as well.
Certainly forest fires help vector in. The other thing, that the number of mineral discoveries have been made in Canada from new highways when there are rock cuts, and the geologists will run to get a look at the new rock that's exposed because of course it hasn't been weathered when it's been blasted through, and makes a tremendous opportunity for mapping. And I think we should talk about the geological surveys across the country. There's the Canadian Geological Survey, and then every province has the geological survey. And these are very dedicated geologists who are very useful. And for our listeners, each province puts out something called the Geological Highway Map. I really encourage people to get the Geological Highway Map. It shows the different geological structures as well as, all of the human geography, if you will, highways and cities. Extremely useful and very interesting for your children if you're doing a cross-country tour. So Ontario has a geological highway map that's fascinating. Province is so big, usually they're done on two sides anyway. Manitoba, Saskatchewan. I haven't seen the BC one, but I'm sure BC has one. I'm sure Quebec has one. So I'd really recommend people, wherever your province is, learn about mining, go and get the geological highway map. Just tremendous.
Absolutely.
I'm going to jump in because I did talk with the Geological Survey for Ontario, and we were talking about, and again, to show how little I know, I was asking, like, what is it like? What's camp life like? And he's like, well, you're away from home, and we have internet and the food. Everybody across the country, when you talk to them about the camp life, everybody says the food. The food is unbelievable. The cooking is unbelievable. It didn't matter. And in my head, I'm thinking, a tent, a couple sticks, a fire, a pot, blowing on a harmonica. And they're like, no, we talk to our kids every night on FaceTime. And it just, I was stuck with very, very old, outdated images of mining. And I'm glad.
Barrington, I'd like to add to that, our interview with Eric Lemieux, who was in Val d'Or. He said, how much more Canadian could this be? We've got hockey, we've got gold mining, and we got beer. And I love it up there. And I spent half my life in that area for those reasons. So.
And he did all of them, right? I mean, you couldn't get more Canadian.
You got the right name for it, for sure. Family.
Yeah, the Canadian show was great. I learned so much. I am truly blown away how big our country is. I think we're all in our little locations and forget how big it is. Speaking of mass and size, let's move along to the Northern Territories. And speaking of family vacations, that is one of my goals before my children don't want to vacation with me anymore, is to get up to the Northern Territories and Yukon with them. Anil, that was spectacular. Some of the visuals that came out of there, and of course the interviews was great as well. So tell us about that week. What were your big takeaways?
So I tried to pick one or two things, Anna. from this entire Mining Over Canada initiative, it's impossible.
I know.
So, I actually want to start off by thanking every single person, company, speaker that participated. Before we started off, just the reception from anybody we picked up the phone and called to speak or be highlighted in this, they were so receptive of it. Made our job a lot easier. We didn't have to chase people around. But also then once we started doing the interviews, obviously I had a chance to sit in on both Scott and Mark's interviews, unedited ones, and was the diversity and passion that every single person had when it came to the mining and resource sector. So that was really cool to see. I want to actually go back to the Canadian Shield, because I sat in on the interview that we did with Ed Hubert, and I know a few of us have brought up some of these points, but the legacy that Canada has in mining safety, I think he mentioned that we had an improved safety record and we were leading the world actually when it comes to mine safety. I think he said in 1992 there was about 15 or 16 workplace injuries. And in the last, let's say 30 years now, they're down to, I think, 1.2 injuries per year. So I think highlighting that is massive. But overall, it was so exciting to learn from all the different regions, obviously the Northern Territories included. I had a chance to talk to some fantastic speakers from that region, both on the government side, the First Nations angle of it, Invest Yukon, and it was just so much to learn. So it's hard to nail down one or two things, but definitely the Canada's record for mine safety and in Ed Hubert's interview stuck out for me.
Totally. The Northern Territories, one thing that I learned, and I think we've all known Anne for a long time. I'm assuming you guys know her. I feel like everyone knows Anne, and I'm referring to Anne Lewis with Invest Yukon. So it used to be coined the Yukon Mining Alliance, and now it's Invest Yukon, correct?
That's right.
And I've always known about them, but I didn't really understand what they were. And I think somebody brought up in one of our dialogues offline, there's so many people that relationships that we maybe had, and it's the first time we really got to dive into what it is that they bring to the mining sector. And what I loved about what Invest Yukon is it started out with 5 companies and it moved to 18, and they're literally competitors in the same location, in the same jurisdiction, seeking the same product and searching out the same capital to get that product, and they're all working together. And by creating their alliance, they're a powerhouse. I mean, it is such a unique way, I think, of going to market, raising capital. They're obviously physically quite removed from the rest of the world, and they use their voices all together, and they really are, they're amazing. So Invest Yukon, they literally, it's government funded or partially government funded, and they bring investors to these companies, and these companies all work together to promote themselves. That to me was so inspirational. I thought that was one of the neatest parts of the Northern discussions.
Absolutely. I think most people don't realize that because, when in the past, when we've been at these conferences, it's so great because it's hard to miss the Yukon Pavilion, whether it might be PDAC, VRIC, or any of the other conferences that happen. And they're all collectively there helping to promote the industry as a whole, which is great to see, as you mentioned.
I want Anil to talk about the Skookum Jim Award, because one of the things that's very relevant is that in Canada's Indigenous peoples have been involved in some of the many of the initial discoveries. The whole Flin Flon Snow Lake Belt in Manitoba kicked off by the man who discovered it. I believe his last name was Collins. And there was Duncan Two Hearts, who kicked off discovery of the Bissett Gold Camp, and Skookum Jim and Kate Carmax. Anil, tell our listeners about Skookum Jim and Kate Carmax and the award named after him.
This topic about Skookum Jim came up a couple of times. Anna and I actually briefly talked about it in our Instagram live last week, wrapping up the week. But I also had more of an in-depth conversation, not only with you about it, Mark, but also with Grand Chief Peter Johnston of the Council for First Nations in the Yukon. And it was interesting that he brought up the fact that, the original discovery was made by this gentleman of First Nations origin, and he was not allowed to take any credit for it. There now is an award that is put together by the PDAC. And again, it's the Skookum Jim Award that's been given out every year. If you haven't watched the Peter Johnston interview, I highly recommend that you take a look at that on CSC TV. But Mark, I'd be probably doing it a disservice talking about it because you know so much more about it than I do.
Okay.
You've done well. You've done well, Anil. And for those, Anna, when you go to visit the Yukon with your kids, Carmax, the town of Carmax, is named after Kate Carmax, who I can't remember her Indigenous name, but I think she was the sister or sister-in-law of Skookum Jim, and also very involved in that discovery. So you got to take your kids there. Drop dead gorgeous.
Okay, so listen, we ended off the tour across the country with British Columbia. I took the hosting of this one mainly because I'm here in BC. My favorite part of it was doing an interview with my dad. And my children are 7th generation British Columbians. And we have a deep background in the mining sector. So that was a privilege for me to put him on the limelight and showcase kind of where my family background came from. A few things from the BC week. And again, Barrington, I mirror your sentiment even in BC. BC is so big. I mean, you know, being in Vancouver, you look at Vancouver and the size of Vancouver, even to Vancouver Island, and Vancouver Island is this tiny little piece compared to all of British Columbia. So I was quite blown away. Some of the stuff that I thought was a really big takeaway was it seems that it's only been really, I mean, we have the gold rush, and I can't remember for the life of me the year that the gold rush really started. Was it the late 1800s? Mark, you would know this. Mark?
Well, I think the discovery was 1896 and it starts in 1897, but 1898 is the year that everybody thinks of.
Okay.
And
So
of course we neglected Robert W.'s service and, the Northern Lights having seen queer sights, the cremation of Sam McGee. But anyway, 1898.
For round 2. But I was quite blown away to find out that although this really was a big part of BC, was the gold rush, it actually was only about 2 to 3 decades ago that our relationships with First Nations and the infrastructure in northern British Columbia really finally started to come together. Which was really shocking to me because I've just always considered British Columbia as a mining province with such a rich history in it. So I was always a little shocked, I was a little shocked to discover that this is actually a lot newer than I thought. We've also had some really big impacts in the mining game. I had the chance to speak with Anna Tudela, who was the ex-corporate secretary from Goldcorp. And maybe I just should have known this, but I didn't realize Goldcorp was a little junior exploration company that was created from an RTO, like lots of exploration companies are, on the CSC and other exchanges. It's a big part of that ecosystem in the public sphere. So I was quite shocked to hear that. The one thing I have to give a shout out to Anna Tudela about is she created a program called Creating Choices. And Creating Choices was developed within Goldcorp, and it graduated 2,000 women in her tenure with Goldcorp. And they would go from, a mining engineer to an administrative person to, somebody within kind of the corporate governance side, and to all of their mines across the globe. And they brought these women in and they created a program that whatever you needed for your next training, they would provide that with you. And 2,000 women graduated from that. So Anna Tudela herself she's created choices. I mean, there's a woman who's leading the way on creating diversity. I didn't feel like I was speaking to too many of one gender in this whole process. I hope you guys felt the same. I felt like diversity is there, whether it's First Nations, men, women, race, age. I didn't feel like I was only speaking to an older generation. There was some amazing young people I spoke to. I feel like we're at the forefront of a really amazing next sector in the mining game. We only have a few minutes left. I encourage our audience to go and check out all these amazing interviews. You guys were amazing as hosts. I think a big part of the CSC is the personalities that we, that we all are. People know us. But hey guys, any last final words? I want you each to just, if you have a final word, why don't you throw it in? Scott, we'll start with you.
And I just wanted to say on the BC side as well, one of the things that's so great of one of the interviews, and again, like our viewers and like some of our panelists, now that we've talked about them, we have to go back and revisit some of them. But the flyover BC that had the pilot and the map and the camps, and talked about the times, gold rush in the early 1900s. It's a great history, great education for us. And, I think it's just endless. And
Scott,
you
on
had
that,
a chance
yeah.
to find too, right?
On that note, I encourage everyone to check out all the DigiGeo videos. They're short and they give you such an amazing view of just the geography of each province. So that's a good one to bring up. Barrington, any final word?
Yeah, for those that are starting to invest, young investors, don't shy away from mining. It might not be some of the hot buzzwords that are flying around, but it's been here and it's been part of the economy and the backbone for the economy. There is no tech boom without mining companies. There is no cannabis boom without mining companies. And right now, gold is on fire. So we have another little boom coming. Just remember, diversify your portfolio and don't shy away from mining.
And speak to the experts, get professional advice, people. Okay, Mark, you next. What's your last takeaway?
Well, a shout out to the capital markets of British Columbia, which have financed so many mine discoveries, including throughout the world. I believe even Hemlo back in Ontario was financed out of Vancouver, but the BC finance community has done a great job in that regard.
Thank you. Anil?
I'm going to end off with a thank you to you, Anna, for putting this together and, kind of being the driving force behind it. And obviously, James, for putting up with us, sending videos and interviews over to him at the most oddest hours and being patient with us.
Absolutely. On that note, Anil, and thank you for that, I want to thank our wonderful sponsors. These are not just sponsors. I consider these organizations as partners to the CSC. They've always been so supportive of us. Thank you, MMP. Thank you, Gellings LLP. Thank you, Odyssey Trust. As well, thank you to DigiGeo, who created these amazing videos. I encourage everyone to check them out. Even your kids would probably like them. So feel free to share those. Thank you to Longford Exploration. Longford Exploration provided us with over 30 hours of visual content across the country to help us build this out. Also, I got an amazing ride up to the Clarity Gold property as we launched the event. I don't know if we have that on our playlist, but check it out. It was pretty amazing. A bit of a bucket list thing for me, for sure. Thank you to North Ripley for all the video editing that was provided throughout the event. We'll make sure that we give them their contact information if any of you would like that for your own issuers. As well, I want to thank Kitco Media. Kitco Media, you guys are amazing. You have such a network of people. You work so well alongside us, and we're just great partners in general. So thank you to all of the partners. This is coming to you as our grand finale. We have a live event on Tuesday, November 24th. We have some panelists that are just going to blow your socks off. They are truly rock stars. We're going to talk about the investment thesis. So now we've taught you everything that you need to know about mining in Canada. Let's find out from the experts how you apply that to the investment side of things. So join us November 24th for the live finale, 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll end off around 4 p.m. Thank you, everybody involved. I really appreciate it. You guys were amazing. Thank you.